personally, I love Broadway, but you know, you've got to just take these things. There are some houses further down on the right which have got those little windows at the top in terrible condition. They're on the Civic Society list, I've been informed, but they're not probably framework knitters houses. They are workshops. If you want to go and see some framework knitters houses of the classic sort, you go to Stapleford. Some of the later variety of framework knitters houses, go to the Ruddington Museum. Please go to the Ruddington Museum if you've never been. It's brilliant. But round here, we're talking mainly here, this is, because this is the old Anglo-Saxon town and Main Street, we're talking here about, we're entering this area, as I've said, where there's lots of workshops, lots of little houses with frames in. People hire the frames from master hosiers, and then they use those frames to make goods. But the master hosier determines what's going to be made, and they determine the price. At this stage, they do not publish the price. There are no prices up. They might pay those people any rate, and if they feel there's a slump in the market, the people slave their guts out, and then they find, having worked 15, 16 hours a day, that was what they found would be normal, maybe more. They were working up to, this is talking about the whole family working, small children helping, and anybody who's an adult, over about 10 or 12, on the frames, as soon as your legs can touch, then basically those people are going to be paid at terrible rates. The phrases that are used to describe that trip off my tongue. I'll come back to them later when I refer to So abating, which is referred to in the songs, means cutting that rate, bringing it down. But they also use other methods to save money. They got wide frames they rented out. Wide frames were brought in for the fashion of pantaloons. But they discovered at this time that you could make big rolls of knitted material and then cut them up and sew them together to make socks, and they looked stockings. They looked good. Put them through the wash once and they fell apart. They shrunk, they lost their shape. So they couldn't sell the quality. People didn't go back to buy those. So the framework knitters were fed up about them using wide frames. And a third issue was that when they went back with their goods, what did they find? That they were paid in what people call truck. Truck meant that they gave you things in kind. In Sutton, there was a very nice gentleman there who paid people in sugar because he got a big load of cheap sugar, so he sold it in sugar. And I'll tell you his name later on when I talk about what happened to the poor souls from Sutton. They got transported, the few that got caught. But what basically happens is those people using truck, and truck was being used just round the corner. I'm going to tell you about 3 attacks. The first one is on High Cross Street, next turning on the right, opposite the Lord Roberts. That was an attack in December 1811. The first big phase of attacks were from March 1811 through to December. And I'll tell you about why they dropped off for a month. Then the second attack was on November the 12th in 1812, because there was a pickup from January 1812 after the master hosiers refused to negotiate, refused to come to terms with the representatives of the framework knitters. They stuck out. They said, this town's full of troops, so we're going to hold out. There's no way they'll be able to do any more damage. The damage continued the next day. So in November 1812, it was still going on. This time on East Street, which is the second turning round High Cross Street on the left. Pointed out to you. Next turning is now called Western Street. On the maps in those days, it's called West Street. And on West Street, on the 21st of February 1812, there was another attack. And I can tell you as well that there was a letter sent to that man who lived there from Ned Ludd. Letters, initially, there was no Ned Ludd. frames was normal in this trade. It had been going on for over 100 years. They broke hundreds of machines over a century in London, all over the place. Whenever there was a dispute, you had a riot. Somebody told me, Julian told me, that is it Eric Hobsbawm, the historian, called the Luddites collective bargaining by riot. And what they do is they go out in the streets, and if you're a coal miner at Woollerton in 1796 and you didn't like your wages, you came down to St James's Street and you smashed it up. That's what they did. So that's how people acted when they had no democratic right to form unions, no vote, no freedom of speech. They were denied education as they fought for it themselves, so they rioted. Okay, Ned Ludd, where does he come in? Ned Ludd appears, I'm desperately looking for a quote as well for this, but Ned Ludd appears back in, from about November 1811. You start to get talks about this character Ned Ludd who's directing things. And Ned Ludd, we're pretty absolutely for definite, General Ludd, headquarters in Shire Wood Camp, doesn't exist. He's just like the front. He stands for Mr. Everyman. There's all sorts of stories I won't go into to explain where it comes from, but we'll leave that. A letter is sent, and it's sent to the man who owns a house in East Street where there are frames being used which are not being paid for at the proper rate. What they do was they would turn up and they would only smash the frames rented out by a hosier who didn't pay the rate. And they would leave the other machines totally undamaged. They would go to the frame where the wide frame that was being used to make pantaloons and leave it. The one that was being used to make sheep cloth, they would smash it. They were very, very specific in their attack. They might have done some other damage along the way, but that's how it goes. And just to stress, the Luddites came from the majority of the Nottingham population. And if you think about the majority of the population, you had all sorts. You had people who actually who lived in this town who were politically very astute and wanted to have a democratic society, wanted the vote, supported Tom Paine. Then you had other people who were strong union supporters who followed the rules of their union and their trade. You did have some criminals in there who wouldn't think twice about stealing something. And you did have some people who did more violence than was necessary. And can you think of any group of people out of the general population who wouldn't represent that strain? So just be realistic, that's how they were. They were just ordinary people of Nottingham. Okay, in East Street, the gentleman who owned it received a letter. Sir, if you do not pull down the frames and stop paying goods only for work, extra work, or make it in full fashion, my company will visit your machines for execution against you. Mr. Bolton, the forfeit, I visited you. Ned Ludd, King's, illegible, Nottingham, November the 8th, 1811. According to one master hosier writing to the Home Office, hundreds of those letters started to circulate from November, all signed Ned Ludd. It's amazing how many different ways you can spell Ned Ludd, and you can't write that clear. We know about these only because they were used in evidence and sent to the Home Office. The best historical record of all of this is held in boxes in the Home Office. Okay, let me just tell you this story. This is a report from the Leeds Mercury. It's about some attacks, and the attacks are on West Street, just round the corner, on the 25th of February 1812. If I've ever got somebody who says, hang on, that was a different West Street, I've really tried hard to identify which was which. But it weren't that many, and I've looked at all the old maps, that I am open to be corrected. At 5 a.m. on Friday the 21st of February, several men broke into the house of Mr. Harvey of West Street in Nottingham. Using a ladder to gain entry to the second story, some of the party stood guard over Harvey and his family, while the others set about breaking the stocking frames. In this case, warp lace frames, apparently very valuable items. 5 out of 7 frames were broken, selected, with 2 escaping destruction as a woman from a neighbouring house called out murder during the raid. Although a pistol was fired at the woman to make her stop, the Luddites decided they needed to make their escape. Climbing out the upstairs window, they took 2 pistols belonging to Mr. Harvey, and in the meantime, 25 other Luddites came down the street to meet them. It was reported by witnesses that some of the new group of Luddites wore military greatcoats. Where they got them from? And one of the party carried a large staff. In their haste, the Luddites left behind the ladder, and one of the party had lost his hat. I like local papers, they tell you the important things. It was another audacious attack, and since Harvey's house is located close to the regimental hospital and the Buckinghamshire militia stationed in Nottingham, Harvey had apparently recently moved from New Radford to Nottingham to try to lessen his chances of his frames being destroyed. The song that's now going to be sung was found as words, as a poem, if you like, which was found in Nottingham by the authorities, stuck on a wall in 1812, and it was sent to the Home Office, and the reason we have the words is because we know about it from that time. And what's good about this song, The Triumph of General Ludd, is it tells us something about the methods and what the Luddites were all about in their own words.
Yeah. So General Ludd's Triumph on your song sheets, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, we are 3/4 of the army of redressers, and this is the Clarion Choir. We have got a CD. I haven't a clue where you can buy it from, though.
The tourist centre.
Oh, right. Thank you.
Town.
Of General Ludd, the hero of Nottinghamshire. Red bubbles to measures of violence so new, till his sufferings became so severe. At last to defend his own interest he rose, and for the great fight he prepared. The guilty may fear, but no vengeance he aims, and the honest man's life or estate. His mouth is entirely confined to white frames, and to those who tough prices obeyed. Those engines of mischief were sentenced to die by a man and the foes of the trade. And that who would all opposition defy was the grand executioner made. And when in the work of destruction employed, he himself to no method confined. By fire and by water he gets them destroyed, for the elements say his design. We're guarded by soldiers along the highway, while closely secured in the room. He shivers them up both by night and by day, and nothing can soften their doom. Mention great Ludd's disrespect for the Lord, who never a moment reflects that foul imposition alone was the cause that produced these unhappy effects. Let the haughty no longer the humble oppressed, let the hardship his conquering sword. His grievances instantly met with redress, and peace will be greatly restored. Wise and the great and their aid and advice, nor their assistance withdraw, till from old-fashioned work at the old-fashioned price is established by custom and law. Then the trade, when this arduous contest is o'er, shall raise in full splendour its head. And cutting and cutting and swearing no more shall be cried on this work henceforth.
And only appropriate now to get a walk on to the Union, because it's only half the story, the Luddites. It's what's going on as well. So can you take great care on this bit of the walk, because we've got to walk across Parliament Street.